Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today is LMIAY, the first Monday video of the month, which means we are tasting, sampling your beautiful creativity. This time kept chilly in the fridge next to the bento made with care by a loving wife. And we got your creativity nice and chilled right next to that. But before we get started, number one, I know everybody waits for this day, for the big reveal. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through LMIAY, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and just like today, we're going to bask in that beautiful, chilled, fridge-frozen creativity. The second way to be featured is through the Fresh Meat feature, where if you are an indie author with a book out or a book that is coming out, if you submit your first chapter and your cover to the Fresh Meat feature here on the channel, it'll be read here to hopefully help more readers find your work, because you know what? You are writing something specific. You are special. You are genuinely the only person who can write what you are writing right now. Hopefully, it's at least entertaining. You'll find your audience. Sometimes it's trial and error and heartbreak. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including local libraries. You are free to feel however you feel about them. I promise I won't tell you if I cry. With that said, let's get into this. So maybe you're unaware. Maybe you are super aware. But one of our beautiful people here around the channel, here around the chat, is Abigail. She is the author of Redskin Redemption, the freaking masterpiece of the loin cringe. And, well, maybe you might have noticed that she went missing for a little while. We definitely all noticed, because she carries such a presence with her. Well, we recently found out that not only was she just disappeared, but she was actually shoved into a refrigerator. That is right. We have another fridged person around here. And we know how authors like to fridge people. So that's what I asked you guys to do. And we found this out when she returned and said that a bird had shoved her into a fridge. Y'all know who the bird is. But she resurfaced, and so now I gave it to you guys to write a story of the fridging of Abigail. An Abigail of your choosing. It didn't have to be the Abigail, but here we are. The first entry is by Mae Tanner. Welcome back, Mae Tanner. An explosion shook the building and the lights went out. Several students screamed. The teacher stood. It appears that we have an emergency. Everyone line up in a single file and head for the stairs. The teacher's calm voice reassured the students. Kuvat pulled out his communicator and entered Elena's number as he joined the other students, and they filed out of the room. The communicator failed to connect. Cracks appeared in the outer wall of the stairwell as the students could see through the holes. A vile-smelling, purplish-red liquid dripping down the outer wall leaked in through the holes and ran down the inner wall. Rubble littered the steps. Students from the other classes joined Kuvat's class in the stairwell. They reached the fire exit and emerged from the building. Fire blazed from some of the other buildings. Kuvat spotted people flitting from the hiding place to the other streets. Sporadic shots echoed in the distance, interspersed with the occasional explosions. Follow me. The teacher led the students away from the buildings. Kuvat glanced at the parking lot. I'm parked in the lot. Couldn't we just drive away? The teacher turned. From the looks of it, I suspect the roads are blocked. You're an adult. I can't stop you from taking the risk if you want to, but I'd advise against it. Kuvat stared toward the car. He bit his lip. I'm gonna take the chance. My family lives a couple hours away. I tried to call my sister, but couldn't get through. He just reached the car when someone called to him. Kuvat, wait! He turned. It was one of his classmates, a moon-faced girl with light brown hair named Bricka. What is it? Are you going through town? He glanced toward the street. I hadn't planned to. My car can handle rough terrain. I figure I'll drive along the riverbank. Why? My son Koti's in a pod in my apartment. Tears filled her eyes. He's only 3. He unlocked his car and opened the passenger door. Where's your apartment? She scrambled in. It's across the river, on the west side of town. He nodded and started the motor, driving around the campus to the primary thoroughfare. When they reached the last straightaway to the bridge, he slammed on the brakes. Bridge is out. Bricka stared at the wreckage of what had once been their route to the other side of the river. There's a footbridge close to my apartment. I use it to walk to class. I think it's wide enough for us to drive across. He nodded and turned the car around, driving back the way that they'd come to the class parking lot. Which way? She pointed toward a side road. That way. He glanced from side to side as they made their way to the footbridge, but the streets in this part of town were empty. He drew a shuddering breath when the bridges came into sight. It was damaging and just wide enough for his car. My building is a few houses down, Bricka pointed. He came to a stop in front of the building and hopped out. The front door hung on one hinge. Hurry! She nodded, and they rushed inside. The lights in the building were off, the interior lit by sunlight entering through the windows. My place is upstairs. The door to Bricka's apartment lay on the floor. Where's the pod? In the kitchen. She led the way. Her kitchen cupboards hung open with their contents scattered across the floor. He stopped. I don't see one. Her cheeks flushed. I can't afford a portable unit, so I was using the food locker. He nodded, spotting the unit. It was as dark as the rest of the building. He tried to open the locker, but the door wouldn't budge. Silently, he cursed her. They didn't make the food lockers to be used as pods for people. Do you have any tools in here? What do you need? A wedge, a hammer, anything similar? She ran out into the hall, returning with a fire axe. Will this work? He nodded. Perfect. He used the axe to demolish the hinges. Dropping it once, he had the locker open enough to extract the small body from the inside. He's not moving. Why isn't he moving? He should be awake. Food lockers depend on outside power to preserve their contents. With no power, he came out of stasis, and there's no air inside these things. He put his ear to Coty's chest. I hear a heartbeat. It's faint, but it's there. He blew a puff of air into the boy's mouth. It seemed to take forever until Coty breathed on his own. The boy opened his eyes and let out a whimper. Thank you so much for not killing the child. Like, they go and looking for the fridge, and I'm like, oh no, the child is in the fridge. The tension in this piece is great. Great start to a story. The next story is by John Morey, called Abby. I can't move. I'm going to die. Abigail had remembered hearing about old refrigerators, the ones that latched from the outside. Don't go playing around in abandoned fridges, her parents told her. You'll get trapped and suffocate. Of course, she hadn't seen a fridge like that since 1985, and that was in her grandma's house, and Grandma was long gone. But this wasn't about Grandma. It was about Jay. Jay Caldwell had romanced, wined, and dined her all the way to the altar. And she had 28 years to regret it. Nearly 3 decades of stale cigarettes on his breath and sharp venom in his voice, and the living hell of his fists and rage. But after their boy graduated, a thought began to enter her mind. Jay seemed to realize it as well, because he told her one thing. Hey, baby, if you leave, I'll kill you. And so she left. Just took the old pickup and drove all the way to the police station. The cops were nice enough to help Abigail file a restraining order and make sure that the truck was in her name, and that was that. This is it. I'm going to die. I can't breathe. Except he found her anyway, cornered her. You can't do this. I have a restraining order, she had said. You see any cops here, baby? He asked. Suffocation, the acrid stench of chemicals, pain, and then darkness. Now, she couldn't move. And she was going to die. I have to try something. Nobody will ever find me if I die in a fridge. I'll be trapped forever, rotting, forgotten. No room inside the fridge. She could barely jostle herself enough to feel the door was locked. But still, she shoved against it, kicking fruitlessly, trying. It was so stuffy in here. Weren't fridges airtight? How long did she have before the air ran out? Come on, Abby, move. Calm down. Concentrate. Abigail stretched her fingers, pushing her hand to maximum distance from the fridge door. She steeled herself and struck against the solid, unyielding steel. Only the rattle of the door against the lock latch and the hinges greeted her. She hit again, and again, and again, and again. Again, screaming. Nothing. I can't do this. I could never do this. It's all over. Why did I even leave Jay? I should have known that he... Why did the door rattle if it was airtight? Fridges haven't had latches in decades. Maybe this one was broken. That sounded like a padlock rattling. Now hammering. Now pounding. Now punching and kicking. Now screaming until her voice cracked and her breath felt ready to give out. I can't breathe. It's not airtight. I can breathe. It's not airtight. I can breathe. It's not airtight. Maybe the door, the hinges. Maybe I can break something. Struck until her knuckles were bloody. Kicked until she broke a toe. Pounded on the metal, her voice cracking, her face red, stars in her eyes. The sturdy padlock, which held the refrigerator shut, rattled with each impact, solid and cold steel that would not be broken. I will not die! One last punch broke the rusty hinges, latching the door shut, making the padlock useless. The fridge doors swung open now, broken and useless, and Abigail Caldwell tumbled out, landing face first in a leaf-covered dirt, still screaming and crying. Trees surrounded her on all sides. Pleasant forest sunlight, unfiltered through branches and twigs, casts the scene in appalling serenity. Jay sat nearby on the bed of an old pickup truck, smoking one of the smelly cigarettes and watching her dispassionately. Yeah, I thought I'd stick around till you stopped screaming, he drawled. Ain't nobody gonna look inside an old fridge in the woods, you know. Still lying in the dirt and still gasping for breath, Abigail looked up at her ex-husband. You tried to murder me, she rasped. Nah, Jay chuckled as he hopped to his feet, reaching for something beyond him in the truck. It ain't a murder 'cause you ain't people. He hefted a sledgehammer and brandished it as he approached in light, casual steps. You're mine, baby. Always was, always will be. Should have thought of that before you left. I guess I got nothing more to say. This is it. Now I'm really going to die. Something possessed Abigail. Something similar to the same spirit that got her punching and clawing her way out of the fridge. She launched herself from the prone position, tackling Jay's ankles as the hammer swung down, burying itself in the lofty soil so close to her face that she felt dirt splatter on her temples. Whoa! Jay exclaimed, cigarette dropping from his mouth as he overbalanced and stumbled. Hold on now. Abby had none of it. She pulled hard on Jay's legs as he tried to move back and tripped him, sending him falling to the ground, where he slammed against a rock. Shit! My arm! He shouted as he rolled away from her, clutching his shoulder. Operating purely on instinct, Abigail did not have time to consciously choose her actions as she grabbed the hammer and hauled herself. Abigail did not have time to consciously choose her actions as she grabbed the hammer and hauled herself to her feet, swaying as she lifted it above her head. One coherent thought filled her mind, and it almost gave her pause. Whoa, this thing is really heavy. Jay looked up just in time to see the sledgehammer descend. Baby? Abby drove home as the sun set behind her, hands shaking against the wheel of the old pickup as she continued to heave dry sobs of terror and relief. It's over. You're alive. He's gone. He's not going to chase you again. She could still see it. Whenever she closed her eyes, she would always see it. Everything that had been done to her. Everything that she had done. But there was one comfort. No one has to know. Ain't nobody gonna look inside an old fridge in the woods. Heck yes! Guys, I am liking the way that this is going so far. We got some triumph. We got some good news going on. I am feeling the good also. I like that it said, hey, a bird did this and you named him Jay. Very nice. Also, great build of the climb. Great build of action and great and her realization, her being in the fridge. Perfect. The next story is by Egao Chan, our very favorite crab, the only crab that you're not allowed to cook. I can cook the crab, though. He gave me a cookbook. It's fine. The story is called Rotten Tundra. No electric lights around her, nor walls or shelves. She's in the toilet, let's be real. Abigail looked around, having a hard time believing her eyes. The ground was covered in uneven ice of different colors. Some spots were brown, some stained with dark red, some dyed with unsettling green. Far above her head was gloomy sky with only traces of light coming through, enough for her to see her close surroundings, but not enough to provide warmth. The cold was numbing. such was expected from inside a fridge. She could hardly remember how she got here. She was just home from class and started goofing off with some online friends. Then a repairman knocked on the door. Later she was picked up and shoved into a large fridge by someone whose face she could not recall. There was no door behind her, just the same icy ground littered with different colors. A building with white and red exterior and dark red chimney stood at a distance. It was not clear from where she was what kind of building it was, but at this moment, anything that could shelter her from the cold would be godsend. The slippery ground took her a lot of time and effort to maintain her balance and speed, yet the actual appearance of the building made it all seem like a joke. It was not a building, but a giant Chinese takeout box standing against a bottle of hot sauce. Dark green mold sprinkled on the exterior of the box, while the hot sauce bottle was covered in dark, dried, and similarly moldy sauce residue. Things were familiar, at least, and they explained why the interior of the fridge would be this spacious. She shrunk when she was locked in here. Yet, there were still a number of things that she did not understand. 1. How could there be light and cloud in this place, while she could find no interior walls of the fridge in sight? And 2. Would there be any way that she could escape this place? Just as she wondered this, a wall of blinding light appeared right in front of her. She had to narrow her eyes and put her hands before her face in order to not lose her sight. A giant moving object came into the space through the wall of light. A hand. The hand was holding a steaming paper bag. It probed around the space a few times before setting down beside the takeout box. A wall of chilling darkness eclipsed the light. Before Abigail could take another look at the hand, everything just went back to how it was. "Fuck!" she cursed. There was not enough time to figure things out now. She needed to stay warm. Lucky for her, the paper bag, almost as tall as the takeout box, was still steaming. She immediately rushed over and started pulling on the wrappers. With some trying, she created an opening on the paper. It was a burrito, still hot, and the burning, spicy smell almost made her tear up and cough her lungs out. At least she was no longer cold. The heat from the pita was enough to sustain her. For a few moments longer, at least. There was no telling how long the heat would last. So, she still needed a way out. She pulled a small piece out of the hot pita and wrapped it around her body before venturing out into the direction from which the giant hand came. Before long, she reached a wall with rectangular holes and semi-transparent crystal balconies. On the lowest balcony, one that was barely 2 arms' lengths away, stood a tall reflective bottle with pale residue along the body. A bottle of milk. A light bulb lit in Abigail's head. It was probably the only way that she could get out, and hopefully before the heat would stop sustaining her. The pita piece was losing its heat, so she needed to head back. She took a bigger chunk from the burrito from a spot that was still covered by paper before turning back and rushing toward the milk. A loud clap came from the edge of the wall. Light shot in through a crack. Abigail screamed and jumped. Her hands clung onto the bottle. Her fingernails sunk into the wax-like residue. She wanted to scream, but she swallowed the sounds as the giant wall swung open and the giant hand grabbed the bottle. "Hot, hot, hot!" a somewhat familiar voice hissed and huffed. This was a young woman who appeared to have had too much spicy food. The force of the hand lifting the bottle and shoving it at a giant mouth was more than what Abigail could handle. Her hand slipped. She fell. Around her were the interior of the kitchen, and below was a wooden floor covered in slipper prints. She closed her eyes in fear. She would fall to her death, and she simply dared not look down. A deafening scream hit her the same time her left arm, back, and left leg had made contact with a slightly sticky ground. She did not die. It hurt, but not as much as what she was expecting. "Abigail, why are you here?" The girl backed herself against the kitchen counter, trembling. "What?" Abigail struggled up and calmed her breathing, looking at the familiar young woman panicking from her presence. "I'm sorry, I don't." "Miss Stacy, help me out here." A familiar male voice came from the back door of the kitchen. "She's not an easy girl to fridge. You promised the other half of the payment when the job's done." Everything made sense. Abigail grabbed the greasy pan on the stove before bolting to the back door. The repairman's face almost made full contact with the bottom of the pan. Lucky for him, his nose did not sound broken. "Fuck you, Stacy!" Abigail cursed and raised her middle finger at the door as she ran into the street. I'm calling the police, and I'm telling my Discord friends all about this. Looks like we've found out. You've been caught. We know what that plumber's been up to. Speaking of that, we need plumber romance. That's right. Freaking plumber romance is going to show up. You freaking rue the day. We're getting that plumber romance. No, coffee romance. I'm glad that she escaped the fridge so that she could tell the tales of how Stacy locked her in a fridge. The next story is by Dukeman. Welcome. It's called No One Escapes from the Fridge. No one escapes from the fridge. That's what they all said. Don't even think about escaping. The second Abigail woke up, she wanted to escape the fridge town. She wandered around the quaint streets for a while. Some empathetic strangers, recognizing new Denzians, offered to get her settled in somewhere. When the topic of leaving came up, all they said was, no one escapes from the fridge. Abigail refused all offers of aid. She wasn't going to spend another minute here. No one owned a car, so she hiked to the edge of town. No one escapes the fridge. No one escapes the fridge? What a load of bullshit, stupid old people. All you have to do is walk out. There's nothing here stopping me from walking out. She grumbled as she walked past a cheery sign that said, thanks for visiting the fridge. Come again soon. She continued walking until the sun hung low on the horizon. An icy blast made Abigail shiver. She clung to her thin coat and looked back. She could still see the silhouette of the sign in the fading light. What the fuck? I've been walking for hours. Abigail sprinted until she was panting. The distance from the sign had not changed. An eerie wolf howl drifted through the trees, followed by rustling of leaves. The wind hit Abigail with another frozen blast. She sat on the ground to catch her breath. Twilight faded and gave way to the night. A far-off, hazy light pierced through the darkness. Fuck it. She dashed into the woods toward the light. A dim outline of a cabin came into view. Abigail stood in front of the door and knocked. This is how people get killed. I'm gonna get murdered by some creepy old man. The door creaked open, revealing an ancient woman. Hi. Thought you were going to get murdered by a creepy old man? I might not split your head with an axe, but certainly can shove you into my oven. I'll make sure to stay away from the oven then. The old woman cackled. Still have a sense of humor, eh? Let's hope it stays that way. She ushered Abigail into her cabin. A roaring fire and the smell of apple pie cooking made the place feel almost like home. People tend to get a bit humorless around here after a while. What were you doing mucking about in the woods? Abigail sat down on a large, fluffy chair. I'm leaving this place. I don't give a damn about what everyone says. And the old woman cackled. Most tend to accept their fate when they come here. They forget whatever old life they had, carry on to the best they can. Some are even happy. You could be too. Abigail leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. No, I remember. I can see flashes. I try to grab hold of the memories, but they slip past. I hate it. What do you see? Abigail cringed and clutched her head. A fridge and some faces. Focus on the fridge, then move to the faces. Focus. I know these people. They're friends. Why'd they shove me in? The crone grinned, revealing a set of long fangs. Her eyes flashed and became yellow with black slits. The answer is simple. They betrayed you, dear. Abigail fell onto the hardwood floor, staring into the roaring fire. But why? We were friends, she wept. The crone had replaced her pasty white skin with shiny black scales. That's an easy answer. They're jealous coveters. You're successful. They weren't. You had. They didn't. I remember. I was successful. I had what they wanted. The crone, having fully transformed into a venomous viper, leaned in, just outside of Abigail's vision and hissed, You remember it all, then? What do you want now? Revenge, Abigail whispered. Say it louder. I want revenge, Abigail screamed. She turned and saw the full form of the black viper. She stumbled back onto the mantel. The viper smiled. Sweet child, do not fear. I am the black viper, the queen of revenge. Swear an oath to me, and I will aid you. Abigail nodded and lay prostrate on the ground. Dear Viper, queen of revenge, I swear to punish my enemies with unwavering dedication. I will not rest until they are destroyed. My revenge is yours. This is my oath to you. She grabbed an ice pick and hammer and led Abigail to a plain white fridge. Without hesitation, Abigail took the tools and entered the crumpled fridge. A sheet of ice covered the back, which she chipped away at, creating a tunnel barely large enough to crawl through. The ice went on forever. Progress was slowed, and she was exhausted. Conjuring images in her head of her victory over the betrayers was the only thing that propelled her forward, further into the depths of the impossible ice cave. Chipping at the ice, Abigail drifted outside of herself, imagining every manner of revenge she would take upon them once she got out. Some were simple and brutal, others were long drawn-out schemes. Whatever the plan was, they ended the same, with their death. Abigail saw the light leak through the ice. She attacked the ice with new vigor, slamming pick and the hammer against the ice, flinging massive chunks off in every direction. When the final crack turned into a small hole, and that hole turned into one big enough to crawl through, Abigail threw herself from the fridge and found herself in an enormous mansion. She stumbled out of the kitchen into a great hall and collapsed in front of a massive tapestry of the Black Viper. I know what I want to do. My revenge will be a quiet thing. My strikes will be subtle. My poison sweet. They will be smiling as their lives fall apart and laughing as I lay them in their grave. Abigail gazed up at the viper. It was grinning. Interesting. Very interesting. Also, looks like Abigail is now cursed, doing some snaky business. Some revenge business. I think the snake is looking for some food, a meal ticket. That is you, Abigail. You're going to be sending some people to be consumed by the snake lady. Especially if it's a bird. The lady may be interested in eating a bit of a bird. Also, I just gotta say, so far, like, going through, you guys are all very unique in your prose. Like, you all have, you guys don't write the same. Nobody has ever, as long as I've been doing the feature, nobody has ever written the same. Everybody has a distinct voice, but you also all do prose differently, and some of them are really fantastic. You know, not to say others are not fantastic, but I mean, I guess that is what is implied. But but you guys have such different ways of expressing things and pacing your stories and describing things that it's a pleasure to read and a pleasure to get to see everybody's different styles of approaching fiction. The next story is by Glampire Mike, the shiny shiny daddy vampire himself. Oh my gosh. Hello. My voice echoed through what I felt was a very enclosed space. Darkness was all around. Chill bumps covered my arms. I could sense people everywhere, but not like being in a city or a store. This felt like being watched. This felt like I was being watched. Hello, bird girl. If this is one of your dumbass little pranks, it's not funny. No one answered. I reached out to feel my way along what felt like a solid glass floor. When I did, a man's voice shattered the quiet. Hey, Abby, watch what you're doing. It's no way to get along in here. I shouted and strained my eyes. All I could see was a faint outline of something resembling a jar. Who are you? Name's Hellman. His easy hillbilly twang reminded me of someone, though I couldn't place who. Hellman, sure, okay. What the fuck am I doing? Why is it so dark? Where? He interrupted. Rude. Mayonnaise, a lot of questions to ask all at once. Slow down. I stumbled and choked on my words. I could hear him laughing. The pun was not lost on me. Hellman, mayonnaise. Ha, yeah, I get it. Funny guy, are you insane? My eyes were slowly adjusting to the near total darkness. This had to be a dream. It was indeed a jar of mayo having a conversation with me. Easy, sister. Breathe. It was a new voice, one from behind. I spun around to see or not see who was talking. Who are you? I'm Dill Pickle. Seems like you've... I'm Mr. Dill. Seems like you've gotten yourself into quite a pickle. More laughter. More voices. Were the jars making wordplay jokes at my expense? I hate puns more than Stacy's writing. Dill, Hellman, who's next? I was raging. A sweet woman's voice sounded. That would be me, sugar. My name is Bree. And yes, these puns are getting a little cheesy. The entire contents of what I now believed to be my refrigerator guffawed and shook with laughter. A dozen tiny voices to my left peeped in unison from a styrofoam tray. Exactly. More canned laughter erupted from the fridge. I felt like I was trapped in an episode of some really bad TV show, caught somewhere between a very good episode of The Twilight Zone and a really bad one of Friends. Yep, I'm sure of it. My brain was toast. A slender bottle stepped forward. That's enough, y'all. Can't you see the poor girl's mind hasn't had time to catch up? I screamed. Let me guess, you're Mr. Hines? I ran as fast as I could. Every turn was met by a stream of ever-worsening dad jokes. She's nothing but a big ham, came a voice from the lunch meat drawer. It wasn't long before I tripped and fell into the door's huge side pocket. A deep, moaning baritone voice answered my fall. There she goes, milking an injury. The whole refrigerator shook with insanity. Cackling jars and hee-hawing Tupperware dishes came at me from every direction. Bounding from the wall to wall, I managed to find a spot away from the heckling condiments. You okay, Abby? A little girl's voice. It was small and tiny. I strained against the dark to try and make out who she was. Abigail, are you okay? I concentrated on the voice. No more than a whisper. Who are you? I'm here to help. Follow my voice. I tried to focus. The ruckusness coming from all around made it difficult, but not impossible. You're close, Abby. I climbed into the crisper where the wilted head of lettuce lay sleeping beside a Ziploc bag full of leftover sushi. In here, Abby. Be careful. The lettuce is cranky when she's awake. The Ziploc bag opened easily. The smell of spicy crab roll made my mouth water. I paused, expecting some stupid dad joke. You're not going to tell me that there is something fishy going on, are you? No, Abby. I want to help. Take a bite of my rice and whisper, there's no place like Lightlark. Delicate hands shook me as I tossed and turned. Abby, wake up. Are you okay? I heard the words, but only faintly, like they were spoken across the great distance. Abby, are you okay? Louder this time. I felt my own words forming. My head throbbed. Yeah, I think so. What happened? Vanya sat beside me. You fell and bumped your head against the refrigerator. You were out for a little bit. She continued talking, but I was distracted by something in my hand. It was light and cold. Pushing myself up, I managed to sit and opened my hand to see a single half-eaten grain of rice staring back at me. Abigail in Refrigerator Land by Mike Shyamalan. When do we get the full feature film? We are going to need it. I know where we can get the main character, or at least, main character casting suggestions. Mike, it's so hard for me to imagine that you wrote this depressing creature back here where everything bad that could possibly happen happened, and then now we're laughing over here at this. Like your dad jokes, on point. Fantastic. Thank you. I love reading your submissions for these so much. The next story is by Anonymous, called Abigail in the Icebox. Walked back to the Bedbug Museum with a dozen rosebuds for Kevin. Abigail waded waist deep amongst the trash on her hoarder's aunt hog farm. Abigail waded deep Abigail waited waist deep amongst the trash in her hoarder aunt's hog farm, falling asleep against the Jimson weed sapling with some half-eaten mushrooms strewn about. She heard a whoosh and felt a swoop. Minutes later, the thalmagist was knee-deep in sludge in the bottom of a drawer of a refrigerator in the crisper, shivering for over 3 hours and wrapped in a lettuce leaf for warmth. Abigail had to wait until the fridge door opened and light came on above, till she finally knew. It was the bird who had done it. Parentheses, Red Dead's Redemption was a masterpiece. Short, simple, to the point. Got it. The next story is by Ben Hayward. Welcome, Ben. There's a demon in a sugar pot, snarling, tempting, and leading me astray. Last month, I lost 5 pounds, and it punished me severely, sending me dreams where I was a factory farm chicken who wasn't producing enough eggs. I woke up with a compulsive need to order fast food and cried as I imagined consuming my underperforming hen self. I could not finish my meal. A string of vomit lingered at the back of my throat. I could not take another bite, but I could hear and feel a voice from the sugar pot egging me on. You look thin. Just another bite. It won't hurt you. Think about the ants and the rats that'll take over your apartment. I screamed, and with my box of fried chicken in hand, I approached the fridge, opening its cavernous door and throwing it inside like a hand grenade before slamming the door. Clever girl, the demon said. Then, realizing what I had just achieved, I grabbed the sugar pot, the vessel of his power. No, no, Abigail, it pleaded. I opened the fridge door. Good fucking riddance, I hissed. You'll regret this. I slammed the fridge door shut. Breathing heavily, I promptly threw my guts up in the kitchen sink and cried for hours. Over the next few months, I lost a lot of weight and got control of my life once again. I even got a boyfriend. Toby. I only had one simple rule. Never, and I mean never, under absolutely no circumstances, not even if your life depended on it, Abigail Forsyth, will you ever open the fridge. It was a pretty simple code to live by. It just meant that I couldn't have food that required refrigeration, like meat or, well, meat. Pretty much everything else was a viable workaround, even if it means that I must go to the shop 2 to 3 times a week. It's at this point that I would like to take a quick break from the story to address anyone reading, listening to this, or feeling it in Braille. You know who you are. The clever clogs who thought, why didn't she just throw the fridge away? I will tell you why. If I threw the fridge away, he would escape. It was my responsibility, my duty, to make sure that he cannot torment another soul. Toby switched on the kettle. Abby, how do you like your coffee? Black, no sugar, I replied. Do you have any milk for normal people like me? He asked. No, no need for it. My jaw and throat clenched tight. My heart was pounding. Surely there's something in the fridge. I screamed loudly, ran between him and the fridge, trying to bar his path. He looked at me like I was mental. And honestly, I felt mental. Toby Finch, if you love me, you won't open the fridge. I felt sick. He looked faintly annoyed and swung the door open. Abby, it looks disgusting. He retched at the stench. The back of the fridge stretched out like the back of a throat. The rotten food had formed into a mass of hairy black mold shaped like a tongue. Before I could react, it formed a mass of tendrils and wrapped itself around Toby's chest and wrenched him inside. I was only able to grab onto one of his feet, only for his trainers to come off in my hand when I gripped it. Thanks again. Thank you, Abigail. I shall enjoy this, came the voice of the demon. The fridge shuddered and jolted, spasming like a body on operating table with those electric pads being slammed into it periodically. I tried for hours to pull the door open, but it would not budge. Beyond it, I could hear the distant muffled screams until hours later when it suddenly stopped. I tried opening the door again, but it was sealed shut, just like before. I slept on the floor, my body curled around a gigantic kitchen appliance. When I woke up, I saw that the fridge magnets had formed themselves in a new shape. Help. Over the picture of the two of us. Help. Over a picture of the two of us that I had stuck on the fridge. The pea was on the floor, having lost all of its magnetism. I immediately went to the shops. I had a plan. I bought an axe. When I came back, I quickly tore the packaging from the axe and drove and drove it into the fridge's outer shell repeatedly. Its hard exterior eventually cracked, oozing thick purple blood. Soon it shattered, looking like the maw of broken teeth. The creature that attacked Toby laid in wait and pounced on me like a big cat. It tried to wrap itself around my chest like it did Toby. I was able to duck before it constricted me, and I was able to pin it to the floor. I pressed the axe against it, crushing it with the heft. It squealed like a balloon hissing with air before bursting in an explosion of rotten food and viscous grime. With the creature dead, I turned back toward the fridge and climbed into it, descending down the gullet into the demon's lair. What an interesting story. I am ready for the trip into the fridge. Like, you guys are so full of just fun ideas, of different ideas. This reminds me of a lot of like different horror novellas and what people do that are just insane horror novellas. And like, I think you got a direction to go. The last story of this month is by Anoni Moose. Never trust a dodo. I don't mean a fool. That's what I was. I meant an extinct bird. I was enticed by a new addition to the rare book collections at my local library, The Study of a Cryptid Who Leaves Messages About the Future. The book itself was old, written just after the Civil War, but it had several well-preserved photographs and some that perhaps a collector restored as they were in color. The sketch of the mystery creature was on the second page, a chubby feathered bird with stubby wings and a huge gullet like a pelican, a strange-looking dodo with a beak curvature that seemed as if it were smiling with wide eyes. The ugly thing made me squeamish just looking at it. Some of the messages were nothing more than nonsense. Someone took a stick and etched silly phrases into the mud. You're soon. Nonsense. Another was of scraps of paper held up by an old white bearded man in overalls. To be. But one of the pictures stood out. A colored photograph of what looked like a modern brick row house, and painted across the front was the phrase useful trope. The pages trailing and leading to this picture were blank. Was the book unfinished? Or were the pages too torn? Curiosity struck. I snapped a copy of it with my cell phone and wanted to share it with my boyfriend. He was good at solving riddles and a skilled investigator. For some reason, the phrase spoke to me. After returning the book, I walked home, lost in thought over this strange photograph. Halfway back, lost in my phone searching for potential clues, I stopped on the sidewalk beside someone on a stepladder scrubbing down the front of his brick row house with soap and water. It wasn't that someone was washing the front of their house that was strange, but what they were trying to clean off was. Excuse me, sorry to bother you, but what happened here? I asked as a chill ran down my spine. The old white-bearded man in overalls stopped his cleaning and looked down and sighed. Some damn kids vandalized my house last night. He spoke with desperation. I just bought these windows. He cleaned most of it off, but a few letters remained. O, P, and E on the far right of the house. One more question. Sorry, I asked. The letters caused my heart to race, anxiety biting. Do you know who might have done it? No, but you do. The old man's voice was flat, droning, and his sunken gaze cut straight through me. My heart leapt into my throat. What? I said no, but I wish I did. He spoke with regret, his face painted with sadness. Maybe I was just seeing things, letting the story get to my head. My desire to get home grew by the moment. I thanked him and left quickly. As I teetered on the verge of jogging away, I heard no brushing behind me, but I felt a looming gaze burning a hole between my shoulder blades, and that sensation spurred me to quicken my pace even more. Only a few blocks from home, a massive traffic jam blocked the road, cars pinned against each other, bumper to bumper for several blocks. I stood alone on a street corner, conspicuously devoid of any pedestrians during rush hour. With a deep breath to calm myself, I felt assured by my nearness to safety. I could bear to be patient for a little while. Intuition prompted me to look over my shoulder. In an alleyway not far from the intersection was a figure roughly the size of a beach ball. I squinted and realized that it was a bird, spinning to get a better look at it. I found it also turned and disappeared into an alley. With the traffic not dislodged yet, curiosity again sank its claws into me, and I couldn't help but to move toward the alley entrance, deeper in, I spotted the bird waddling around. It bore striking resemblance to the creature in the book. The animals certainly could be mistaken for a dodo, but they were long gone. Not only that, but it had a normal stubby and flat beak. Still, I thought my boyfriend would get a kick out of it and raised my phone ready to snap a picture. As I did, it bolted farther into the alley. I followed it into the alley, frustrated because I had the perfect angle lined up, but I missed it. Not wanting to give up, I found myself surrounded by abandoned appliances, garbage piles, and overused burned barrels. It was no place that I wanted to be, but I was committed and kept going with a brisk pace until I hit a dead end. I looked around angry that I wasn't quicker, and now pictureless, my resolve wavered. I had spent enough time messing around, and it was time to see if I could get home. Just as I readied to leave the trash heap, I heard a rustle behind. From between the piles of garbage emerged the dodo-like bird. It waddled with dirty blue feathers and a long orange beak. I don't know how or why its beak became elongated. Maybe I was just seeing things, but not one to squander opportunity. I readied to take a picture. Raising my phone, the bird stopped and turned slightly. Then it looked me in the eye, and its beak deformed. It was smiling at me. I froze, realizing that this was the creature from the book. Before I could react, it charged me with a screech. I stumbled backward and fell into the old fridge. The door latched shut. In near total darkness, I slammed my fist as hard as I could, yelling for help. My attempts to call anyone on my phone failed. There was no reception. It became hard to breathe, and my last thoughts were of the hope that my boyfriend would come and save me. The bird has done it, indeed. I like the magical, like, guys, this is, I swear, your guys' short stories that are submitted to this sustain me and, like, meet my meet my preferences much more than a lot of the books that I've been reading lately. Like, you guys just have fun. This is just kind of, like, magical and weird, and I'm into it. Thank you so much, everybody, for just submitting these every time, and for participating when you feel like participating, and for sharing just what you can come up with when given the same prompt. It's always amazing for me to see. And thank you, everybody who came to watch, to check out what your peers are doing. Maybe consider submitting your own short story to the next one. With that said, thank you, everybody, so much for watching. Let me know which one was your favorite down in the comments below. All that said, have a great week, and don't die.
The only people who should come are those who want to meet their monsters.
If this is what Agatha wants, I don't know how we can even dispute it.
I change lives, baby.
And I and them. Sweetheart, no bargains hold. Only fools know restraint.
Only losers lose!
I've been under the knife so many times, I'm practically immune to it.
If your scissors are dull, may I recommend sharpening them with leather?
I think I hit you.
Mima says I must have a guardian angel.
To enter the ring but abstain from playing is suicidal. Your virtue makes you nothing but a liability.
You're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die.